Ever feel like the heart of our community gets lost in the noise of the daily news? I'm your host, Pastor James Dimmel, and on the Beyond Belief Incredible Stories of God's Miracles podcast, we're pulling back the curtain on the people and projects making a real difference right here in our backyard. From local leaders to hidden gems, we share the stories that hit home. Join the conversation every month. Search for Beyond Belief Incredible Stories of God's Miracles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Welcome to Beyond Belief podcast. I'm your host, Matt Lamb, here with Pastor James and our special guest, Jenny Hill. I'm excited about this episode because Delbert, on our last episode, is actually Jenny's husband, and we get to talk about our title, When God Rewrites a Marriage. So we get to hear the backside of what they went through and things from her perspective, and I'm super pumped about it. So I'll turn it over to Jim Bob and we'll get rolling.
How are you, Jenny?
I'm good.
So Jenny's the executive director of the covering also. How's the covering doing?
The Lord has blessed us, and it's full of women and children. How's that?
That's right, and it's an amazing thing, right?
Yeah.
I just want to read a quick scripture, and then we'll get started. Psalm 68 and 6. I kind of think that this is kind of the theme. God sets the lonely in families, leads out prisoners with singing, but the rebellious will dwell in a parched land. That's a powerful verse. We'll just get right into it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So we had Delbert here, and we want to make sure that he didn't tell any lies.
Okay.
And so we know that you'll keep him on the straight and narrow. But to set the stage or to bring us back to that stage, everything that was going on with Delbert, it was kind of a secret. And he was struggling with a homosexual life, and you didn't know anything about it.
No, not initially.
And so you had what you said was a normal Christian marriage. That's what you thought.
That's right.
And so it was, you had expectations like any other young couple would have, excited, growing a family, all of those things that everybody had. God was blessing you.
That's
and
right. Yeah.
Then on a drive home from church, everything fell apart.
That's right. Everything changed.
So do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I think, we've been moving through life as we all do. I didn't notice some probably drifting apart, and I probably didn't pay attention to that. And one night, him and I were actually by ourselves. The kids weren't with us. We were leaving a Sunday evening service, and I was driving. He had asked me to drive for some reason, which wasn't normal back then. And yeah, he just began to profusely cry and said, I just don't want to come to church anymore. But then he followed it up with, and I really don't want to be married anymore. And so, stunned, but I think in my mind, I thought, well, he's pretty young, but maybe he's going through, midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Because, this was back in the early 2000s, and couples in the church just didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that moment left me with a bunch of questions. Yes.
So I want to take it back a little bit further than that. Now that you've kind of set the stage, let's go back to that 17-year-old girl. We kind of talked about that briefly in some of the emails that we had talked about. And you look back at Delbert, and what kind of life did you picture with Delbert? As a 17-year-old girl, you're building a life together.
Yeah, I met him. I first met him at 17, and it didn't take. We went to church together, same youth group. It didn't take very long for me to realize I want to marry him. We had a big youth group, but that's just. And some years would go by, but we developed a really good friendship. I think some companionship, and it would be till I was 21 before he asked me to marry him, and we got married. But I think in that time, I pictured just what I saw really in the church. Mm-hmm. Doing life together, building a family. Delbert was, I always tell people the difference between Delbert and any other guy was I just felt at home with him.
So he's easy to talk to.
Oh, yeah. He was
easy to get along with.
When he was that age, he was very, very fun, very
Well, you said
lighthearted.
at that age.
Yeah. Well, you know what age that's to all of us. that's the difference between a 19-year-old that the world is at his fingertips and the 55-year-old that's like, oh my goodness, what life is. God is good and life is hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, just very fun to be around and very confident. I think that's what made me feel like I'm at home with, I'm at home with him, and I think a lot of it was because he was very confident and he had a right to be, he'd accomplished, come out of, some poverty and had begun to accomplish things. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of what I pictured our life. I was willing to follow him.
I see.
So you talked about, he kind of expressed all these things on the drive home from church.
Yeah.
Take us into that car. Like, what was processing in your mind when he began to cry and utter those words like, don't take this personal, but...
The don't take it personal come a little later in that car ride home. I didn't really have a lot to say. I mean, I was, just like you said, just trying to process. This doesn't happen in our group of people, I guess. And so just trying to not overreact and yet kind of sort through it. So it would be, we get home and I think we just tried to move past it, or I was trying to move past it for the first couple weeks, but then when he kind of packed his stuff and left, that begins this next part, now you have to deal with it. Now it's not, I had a really bad day type thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So after we get home and, can't move past it because he's moved out, that begins that part where he couldn't really explain to me, what's going on.
Did he tell you? Did he say, hey, I'm struggling with homosexuality?
No, absolutely.
So after all this stuff is going on and, you're starting to build a family and all this stuff, he's crying and basically beating around the bush and not telling you what's really going on.
Right. And he just couldn't. Now, in the moment, I'm able to look from this perspective, so a lot softer. But in the moment, there was just no way he could come out with that. Again, we're thinking back in like 2001, it's I don't want to say it, but it's sad. We're living in a much different world.
Well, we didn't talk about it then.
No, and that didn't happen in the church. So he couldn't. He just said, I don't want this, And when I would press him, it's where he said, and we laugh now about it, because I tried to kill him when he said, don't take it personal. I was like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, you're leaving, And so we laugh. Now, there was a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Had it, come from a pastor at that point, there was a lot of truth. Like, I can't beat myself up. I've got to figure out, coming from him and not willing to say, hey, why after these years, which have been approximately 10 years of marriage, you're just taking off, is a little. So it's a point that now we can kind of look back and laugh. But at that point, I just didn't know what to do with any of that.
And that's a hard situation to be in, because how many kids did you have at that time?
2. Yeah.
So you already had Colin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you discovered that he wants to have a divorce, or he's how did he bring that up? Because like it goes on for a while, right? And he didn't say.
Yeah, it goes on. He's like in and out, but then he comes back and begins to just tell me, hey, I'm out running around. He can't really tell me a lot or he won't tell me a lot. Just, I'm out, doing my own thing. You have every right for divorce. And I knew what he was meaning. We both knew scripturally what he was saying. And so he would say that to me. It seemed like on multiple fronts. I'm doing what I want to do. I've given you every reason for divorce. I just want to be me.
Did he ever come right out and say, divorce me?
No, he never said those words. He said all the other,
Yeah.
And again, it was for him, which he's always told, he's already talked through his story. He didn't want to lose all the family and everything that he had. Mm-hmm. And yet he was very much wanting to pursue this. And so he certainly didn't want to be the blame. I don't know if I could have read all that into it, because he begins to, talk to me about that. And it was pretty early on when I thought, after this had went on for several months, I'm like, God, I don't know, but I don't want to live like this. And I found myself, we know the scripture, so I found myself digging in the Bible, looking at the scripture, if he's given me a reason for divorce. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that, I went to a particular portion and where it said, but for adultery and all this, my eyes, the Lord took me right there, and I knew he was speaking because he took me to the next verse where it said, but understand that Moses only give you the right of divorcement because of the hardness of your hearts. And I knew, and I can't even say I was all that spiritual at this point, but I knew that was God asking me to stay. And so, yes, he did say those things, and yet I just knew that word was from the Lord. Now, there were days, you have those days where you second guess all that, but the Lord had just anchored my feet based on that's not what I have for you.
Right. And so, Matt, what do you think?
I just, I don't know, to process as just listening, I'm just amazed that someone can have faith like you and listen to God and see that. I know I went through some personal things as well, and you do have to have that faith, right? Yeah.
So how do you, when so you talk about the bill of divorcement, and then how did you get like heart of heart, or did you have numbness, or were there any of those issues that kept coming up, like, I got to get out of here. I understand that the Lord's trying to speak to me and tell me to stay, but nothing is happening the way that I think it should, Yeah. I think sometimes we as people do that.
Absolutely.
And so, can you speak to that a little?
Yeah. Because when he spoke that to my heart, and I really felt like he did, one, he anchored my feet. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but there have been a few times in my life where I know he just kind of took a hold of my feet and helped them stay down when I would want to have ran. And the other part is I think on purpose, the Lord doesn't tell you, hey, it's going to be another 4 years. All he really ever asks us is, can you do this today? Like, oh yeah, I can do this today. And there were many of those days where he said, can you do it today? And
that's good
like,
too.
I can do it today. And then as we, moved forward a little bit, eventually after probably a year and a half, and he told the story about how he did come back home. Mm-hmm. And very much for his family. It wasn't a reconciliation with us as much as I'm not willing to give up my family per se. But in that, after he'd been home for a while, eventually, and there were some events that led up to, he did finally share with me that he was struggling with homosexuality.
So that's 4 years into this?
That's probably 3 years into it. Yeah.
So let's talk about you, because Delbert don't get to steal the show. What was your relationship like with Jesus in this time before, during, and then we'll talk about after in a little bit.
Right.
So, I mean, you said you had a pretty good relationship with Christ, but you feel like everything changed when you started to go through these struggles, because you'd never really experienced a struggle like that before.
Right. I had been born again, and I know I was born again. But I would say, if I had to describe it, I still lived very much, very much at a distance from the Lord, if that makes any sense. I wasn't in open sin. I wasn't anything like that. But this wasn't a day in, hour by hour relationship. It was more centered on the church. It was more centered on what you can come to know from just a church relationship. Yeah. And so as we enter into this time, and I was teaching the Bible. I loved the Bible, but there was some distance in that, for the lack of a better word. And so as we begin to go into this, it doesn't feel like it, but he begins to grow that relationship. All I know is now I need him. Up to this point, yes, I needed him for eternity, but now I needed him every day. And so something was beginning to shift, but I can't tell you that I felt that. I'm trying to get day by day through. And I know he's spoken that word. I don't feel super spiritual outside of that.
That's good.
And he's getting me through every day. And a lot of times it was, well, can you do this today? Yeah, I can do anything today, you know. And so it was that kind of a relationship, if that makes any sense.
So God's speaking to you and saying, just do it today.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no visual evidence of anything getting better.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. In fact, when he finally shared with me that that he struggled with homosexuality, one part's devastating. You know, how do you deal with this? Where do you go with this? But then there was a little part of me that had hope, because I knew he was never being honest. Like, he wasn't being forthright.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in you know, he already shared he was doing these things, but there was no like deep honesty, like realness.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that's the plug. You know what I mean? That's what's held him in. And so now maybe he moves into this realness, and this changes everything. And unfortunately, that wasn't necessarily the case.
So then there's this deep personal transformation that happens with you. I mean, he already said it happened with him, but it happens with you also.
Yes.
Right? And then
in levels. And that was that first level. He was teaching me to trust him. I didn't know that then.
Lord.
Yeah, I'm needing him every day, like, and don't even realize that he's building this next level relationship.
Well, and I think one of the things that you said that was very powerful was that you said, I need to change too, but I didn't realize it.
That's right.
So can you speak to that a little bit? Because like when you see Delbert and you know, the I think there was 2 podcasts because they broke them up, but when you see him and he talks, you know, he kind of takes the blame and it's all his fault. But, you know, I think it's big for you to say, you know, I had issues too.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot of, and when we're dealing with anything, I mean, Delbert was dealing with homosexuality, but when marriages are dealing with anything, you know, there's that split that, I mean, like when I counsel people, one of them always wants to say, well, I'm in the right.
Right.
But if we can both sit down and say, you know what, we both have issues, then that's when you get to step into really what's going on and be real is what you said. That's the term right. You used. And then that's when God really begins to revitalize what you thought was dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so will you speak to that a little bit? Because it's not that either one of you, you know, were, I mean, I guess Delbert was blatantly, you know, he said I was in sin, but you weren't. And so the fact that you're thinking, you know, hey, I needed to change too. Can you explain that to you know, ladies that are thinking, well, I don't need to change?
Right, correct. I can. During this portion, while we're still, I don't know if there's any hope. I think there are some things that's changing inside of me, but I don't realize fully how far I was on the wrong side until I began to go through Pure Life. And so during this time, he's preparing my heart. And I think really what he's doing is allowing me to be broken. Because I was, you know, I come in very dysfunctional. I didn't know how to do relationship when I come into our marriage. I was very kind of, there was a part that I just hid. It was hard for me to have deep relationship. There was all of that. But I couldn't have told you there was all of that. And even though the Lord saved me, did not mean I knew how to love him very well. Mm. You know, and I wouldn't even have been able to recognize that what he needed more than anything was respect.
Okay.
And those are things they were just concepts that never occurred. Did I love him? I did. Did I know how to convey it? Did I know how to communicate it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's a wrap on this episode of Beyond Belief Podcast. We want to hear from you. What's happening in your corner of the world? Reach out to us on social media and let us know. If you loved what you heard, please take the like button down, spin it around, and put it back. Then subscribe and tell all your friends. I'm your co-host, Matt Lamb. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next episode.